Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome once again to Dreamshot. Many of us own a DSLR, and even if we don't own a DSLR, most likely we own a point and shoot camera. And these days, when it comes to the settings of the point and shoot cameras, they are nothing less than a DSLR. Whatever experiments we do with the DSLR or point and shoot cameras on the first day or the second day we have bought the new camera, eventually we are going to stick with the auto mode, just because we are not sure what other modes in the camera dial stand for. Most of the time, whether it's an outing or a family function, we end up using that auto mode. And even in cases when you don't want the flash to trigger, the automatic setting will let the flash go up. Today I'm going to tell you what these camera dial modes stand for. So next time when you take out your camera for any function or travel, you know exactly what mode to switch on based on what you want to click. And this video is for both Canon and Nikon users.
It's called mode dial or camera dial. It's a dial used on digital cameras, both on DSLRs and point and shoot cameras. Usually the mode dial is located at the top of the camera, but we don't have a standard location for point and shoot cameras. But on some point and shoot cameras, the dial is found on the back of the camera along with some menu navigation button. The modes on the dial can be divided broadly into two types of controls. One can be called automatic controls, wherein you don't have to do any kind of manual interventions. You just switch the mode and the camera decides how to take the picture. In manual mode, depending upon the mode you select, you can change certain settings manually and thereby get desired results in the image. So firstly, let me tell you which is more important, the manual modes or the automatic controls. Well, if you are interested in photography and if you are a serious photographer, you want to know more about the manual controls, then definitely the manual modes are important for you. You have to experiment and decide on what mode is best for you depending on the situations. However, if you are not very keen in knowing the settings inside the camera and do not want to intervene manually, you want to exploit the camera in the easiest way possible, then the automatic controls are the best for you. Very briefly, let's go through all the modes available in most of the DSLRs or point and shoot cameras. When we switch to the auto mode, the camera will decide the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, flash settings, everything by its own. All you need to do is point and shoot. The disadvantage of auto mode is that it may try to trigger the flash even when it is not necessary. When you switch on to the portrait mode, your camera will think that there is a subject in the foreground of the frame and will choose the depth of field as less as possible in order to keep the subject in focus and make sure that the foreground and the background is blurred out. Coming to the depth of field, let me tell you, you might have noticed that certain part of your image is in focus and the other part of the image is blurred out, whether it's a foreground or a background. This particular area which is in focus is the depth of field. Kids mode is very similar to portrait mode. However, it just adds a little more color boost to make sure the kids' photos are vibrant. When you switch to a landscape mode, camera makes sure it keeps small aperture with a very big depth of field, making sure to create a very well focused image from foreground to the background. In the night portrait mode, the camera will try to balance the light. The aperture will have to be fairly wide to balance the light from background and foreground and keep the subject in focus. Macro mode is used to click the photo of a very small object clicked from a very closer distance. The camera tries to focus as close as possible and it will keep a very narrow depth of field. When you switch to the sports mode, considering the sports to be fast-paced activity, the camera makes sure it has the high shutter speed. ADEP mode in Canon is hardly explored. When the camera is set on this mode, the only job of the photographer is to select the objects in viewfinder that needs to be in focus by pressing the shutter halfway and take the shot. The camera will decide on the aperture by making sure all the objects which are selected through the viewfinder are in focus. Coming to the manual modes, let me talk about the program mode first. In program mode, you can definitely tweak some default settings, but then I found that the most important use of program mode is to override the automatic flash behavior. This is one of the most irritating aspects of the auto mode, that even when you don't want the flash triggers. Shutter priority allows the photographer to control the shutter speed, while the aperture and ISO sensitivity are calculated by the camera. You can use it when you want to freeze the moment in a certain way. Aperture priority allows the photographer to control the aperture, while the shutter speed and ISO are calculated by the camera. You can use it when you're very specific about what part of your image should be in focus. Manual mode allows the photographer to have control over the shutter speed, aperture and ISO independently. Experiment on this mode and use this mode if you're serious in photography and want to gain more control of the image you're clicking. You can use bulb mode when you're taking the pictures at night. The shutter needs to stay open for longer time. Most of the time the night images are taken at a shutter speed somewhere between 1 second and 30 seconds. However, if you don't want to be confined to a time limit for shutter speed and keep the shutter open for whatever time you want, be it 5 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour, etc., then you have no other choice but to use the bulb mode. Depending on what kind of photos you take frequently, you can customize and save the settings for future use. It is represented by U in some cameras and C in other cameras.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any queries or clarifications, please make sure that you comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe our channel and hit that bell icon for regular updates. Thank you once again. Take care.